All right, so Scott, why don't you go ahead and fill in Strength Coach Network Nation as to what you've been up to since January, and kind of where you've been.
Yeah, so first off, thanks for having me on. But I have been underwater in the throes of getting into SEC football and kind of starting from the ground level in terms of building up this program and putting together this high performance operation that really fortunately starts from the top with Coach Kelly. And so it's been what we came into was a very in terms of specifically pertaining to my role, a very bare bones sports science ecosystem, and bringing in a lot of new tools that were novel to the players, novel to some of our coaching staff and medical staff as well, and deploying all of it, and making sure that what we're getting out of it is very pragmatically used and actionable for all stakeholders involved. And so it has the fortunate part about how it all rolled out is that it with partially with logistics of getting pieces of it delivered, and then partially other constraints, that things rolled out very segmentally. It wasn't like we all of a sudden had 10 different things going at once. So it was really nice to kind of get our bearings around one of the particular pieces that we're utilizing. Then within the next week or 2 weeks, another piece rolls in, and kind of central to all that's been building out our AMS through SmarterBase. So that's been kind of the ongoing project, and it's one of those that the more you learn about it and the more you start building, the more you realize there's even more to build. So it's kind of like all these fractals are created of, well, now I got this report or this dashboard done, but then you realize you need 3, 4, 5 more dashboards off of it, or ways of looking at your data off of it. So it's just been this never-ending building process, and just a lot of iterating, a lot of adapting to what we're seeing, what we're getting with the athletes, and a lot of just fine-tuning and progressing from there.
So multiple things to unpack from that, but first of all, what would be your piece of advice to anybody that is new to listening to what you just talked about, or new to Strength Coach Network, about how you got there? Like, give them a piece of advice on, I know selfishly how you did it, but kind of let them know so that way they could, possibly do something similar.
I think kind of the theme, I would say, in terms of how my career has been able to progress. So, it started with the opportunity that I had at Kentucky under Eric Corum. I went to the CVAPS conference, actually. Shout out Jay DeMayo. Knows. I went out to that conference because Eric was speaking at it, and it runs a little bit deeper than that in terms of I had seen videos of Eric talking about concepts around high performance when I was still an athlete in college, and it was one of those light bulb moments where it was like, this makes a lot of sense, and then comparing and contrasting with the experience that I was having as an athlete, and realizing that the way things are done conventionally did not align with what I perceived to be the right way to do things. And so I kept up with what Eric was doing at Kentucky from 2012 till 2015. Saw he was speaking at the CVAPS conference, and went out to the CVAPS conference and wanted to just hear him speak and maybe get the chance to talk to him. And he'll tell the story, I'll tell the story too. I went up to him and had a fangirl moment of kind of just being really nervous talking to somebody that I hold up and still hold up in such high regard, and just told him I loved what he was doing at Kentucky and that I'd love to come be a part of it. And he said, send me your details. And 2 weeks later, I moved to Lexington. And similarly, I knew Jake, my current boss. Kira had actually connected us when I had started working at Arizona, just for us to talk shop about what I was doing with GPS at Arizona, things he was doing at Notre Dame at the time, and we kind of just always stayed in touch. And we had an exchange when things were starting to spool up with LSU, and now I'm here. And so it's definitely having conviction and knowing what you want, and being proactive in terms of forming relationships. And like, I had this conversation with one of my interns the other day, that if you go into any sort of social interaction with other professionals in the industry with the intent to network, I think the interaction comes off that way. But if you go into it with the intent of building relationships, that's where all of my career progression has come from. Like I never, I feel like it's kind of like dating. Like if you're like adamant that you have to have a girlfriend, and you're going out and you're like you've got to get it done, but then it just like it doesn't present itself. But then relationships I feel like tend to pop up when you're not necessarily looking for it. So if you're going into it looking at it as like I've got to network, I've got to meet people that are going to connect me into jobs. I feel like that intent comes through in the interaction. But if you go into it with, I just want to meet other like-minded professionals, expand my circle of friends and people in the industry that I can, just have conversations with. That's how I've, been able to land where I've landed is, building authentic relationships with people and, they connect you to other people that are like-minded. And, now I'm here.
And when you say now I'm here, what is your official role for everybody that is wondering? And then talk about it, because I feel like a lot of people, I know like when I had my sports scientist intern, she falsely thought that if you get a role like that, you never get to coach on the floor or anything. I know it all depends on the school you're at and compliance, but just talk about what your official role is and what you get to do, because I think it's a pretty sweet setup you got.
Yeah, so my official title is Manager of Applied Sports Science, which very conveniently and interestingly abbreviates to MASS. um, which when I talk to recruits or
That's why he has to be so big and jacked, because he's
Exactly.
the mass. He's the mass
as,
guy.
as
Do
I
you think
tell the
it's a
kids,
coincidence?
what's
I don't
that?
think so. Do you think that's a coincidence? I don't think so.
Which, as I tell the kids, I'm not their weight coach, I'm their strength coach, but when I'm talking to either recruits or people like the more like just common person or lay person, I basically tell them I'm a nerdy strength coach is what I am. I work kind of at the intersection of being a performance coach, but then also data and analytics and very succinctly storytelling. And so with my role, my and what I appreciate about Jake and coming into this role and kind of how it was structured is that he's made it very clear that my prioritization is all of our sports science pieces. So managing our collection, our analysis, our visualization, and information dissemination processes for the various sports science technologies that we have. And he's made it abundantly clear, and I appreciate having that clarity as far as what I need to get done. That those are the pieces that have to be done first within my job, because I'm not one of the football 5 strength coaches, if you will, that are limited by the NCAA bylaws. So my first and foremost job is getting all those pieces done and making sure that they're done very, very well. Like you alluded to, there is the compliance piece of it that with the interpretation they've made of the rules, I am able to be out on the floor and working with the athletes. I'm not just a nerd locked behind a computer screen. And but like during sessions, I'll handle our testing. I'll assist the guys with running the elite form. But I obviously have accreditation and experience being a performance coach, and so I'm afforded that opportunity as well when my role as our manager of applied sports science doesn't have a higher duty to make sure that that's getting done first. So there are days where I'm back there the entire session and I'm running guys through 4stacks or through the Nord board, or I'm processing GPS data or what have you. But I know I'm striking the right balance with it, because all of my athletes still call me coach, even though I insist on them calling me just my name. Like I not like the hierarchical feel of like calling me coach. Like just call me Scott, whatever.
Call me by my government name.
Yes. But they still choose to call me coach, and so I know I'm striking the right balance with that, because they don't just see me as the the nerd behind the screen. They view me as one of their coaches, and there is an opportunity there within my role specifically to coach them or inform them of what the various tests or their GPS numbers or what have you are telling them. And I think that's where the experiences I've had being a strength coach, being an athlete, have allowed me to really bridge that gap and provide them with feedback that they, understand, because these, this isn't their educational background. This isn't what they've, decided they're gonna, put food on the table with in terms of a profession. And oftentimes I think if you don't have that ability to take the complexity that, can be sports science and bring it to the level of your athletes, that's where they just view you as the nerd with the laptop who makes them hook up to machines and whatnot. But when you're able to, take pieces of what they're doing, and relate it to what they do at their position, what they're, maybe feeling in their body on that given day, that's where they start to, connect more with all these pieces that we're having them do. And there was a really, really cool moment for us as a staff where our kids love to do like talk shows or podcasts with, of course, there's a bunch of beat writers around the program. And a couple of our linemen were on a podcast, and they were talking, they got a question about the GPS system, because that's been new for LSU football. And so they're seeing, the pictures of the sports bras and whatnot, and people are wondering what it is and how it works. And one of the concepts that we kind of talked to the boys about is, momentum, or in this case, we call it a hit score for them. And part of that was stemmed from, I remember Eric talking about it in one of the videos from Kentucky. But then Brian Mann just recently had that paper about momentum being a better indicator of athletic development or athletic progress in collegiate football players than just outright speed. And so we started to, run with, again, this is where, I know we were going to get to it, but SmarterBase is awesome because we can pull in their body weight, multiply it by their velocity from when we do our speed training, and give them a hit score. And obviously it's not an absolute that if your hit score is higher, because there's a technical component and what have you. But a guy that's big and fast at the same time is really what what we want you to be able to do, and what we're aiming for developmentally with respect to our different position groups. And so this player was on there, and he started talking through the speed testing and how we can utilize the GPS in conjunction with that, in conjunction with their body weight, to give them their hit score. And so he's talking through this concept of momentum, and he even says momentum in the video. I think he meant it more abstractly rather than the actual like physics concept. But he's talking through it on this, and that we're calculating this and giving it back to them, and talking to them about how speed is great, but speed and size tend to be a effective proxy of progress in college football. And so to hear that landing with these athletes, sometimes you, and all too well, sometimes you feel like you're just talking to a wall when you're trying to give enough education so that they understand there's a why, but not too much to where they tune you out. And so you wonder how much of what you're saying is actually sticking. But then we hear this being, echoed in some of the podcasts that these guys are doing, and it's, it's really validating to know that just when you think they're not necessarily like fully engaged in what you're doing and what information you're giving to them, they're fully attuned to it and internalizing it and able to, speak to it in their own words, not just regurgitate the way that we've said it verbatim.
Well, then, kudos to you. That's why they call you coach, because you get them engaged, you give them piece of education and tools that they can sort of, kids want to learn. We sometimes feel like you said, we're talking to a wall, but actually, if you make it interesting and rather than say dictate a class and be like, I'm going to teach and talk so how much I know, rather than hey, this is what we're doing this and this is good for you, and they'll be paying attention. So no wonder why they call you coach. Maybe you're just teaching them stuff.
Honestly, I think it stems from the top with Jake. He has made it very clear that our general directive is that everything that we're doing is to make them better football players, not just to be able to pat ourselves on the back and say we drove their squad up by 100 pounds and we're the best strength coaches in the world because of it. He's made it very clear to the players that everything that we're going to do is going to serve a purpose for you to be better at your sport and reach your potential in your sport. And so that's where, when we do give them those bits and pieces of information, we're constantly tying it back to the thing that they're here to do. And so that's where I think, it's been talked about a lot. There's so much accessibility to information with the proliferation of the internet and all of these various platforms that just allow you to consume information at exponentially higher rate than people have ever been able to. And, you know, within their space, of course, they're hearing it from a lot of different people about how they need to be training, how they need to be developing. And so they're just bombarded with it. And, you know, for athletes that they don't have a background in this to be able to have a valid and reliable filter on what's useful, what isn't, it's tough for them to really, you know and to take hold to what actually is going to be of utility to them. And so that's where, when we're constantly tying everything back to maximizing their availability and their potential on the field so that, you know, they can practice their sport more, they can become better at it, and then they can ultimately achieve their dreams of, you know, which for these guys, beyond winning a championship here, All-American, All-SEC accolades, you know, is being able to go to the next level and play professional football. I think that's where it's really heightened their sense of purpose and intent towards everything that we're doing, and in turn allowed this to be much more efficacious than it might otherwise be if we weren't putting it in that context for them.
How are you guys, and you mentioned it, and you know we'll dive into it now. How are you able to utilize SmarterBase to keep everybody, all those stakeholders, on the same page, to keep them on the, you know, on the field and available so that they can play their sport? What has been the biggest learning curve? And to any of our listeners out there that might be going through the same thing, what would be some, you know, just piece of advice that you'd give them?
Yeah, so for those who aren't familiar, SmarterBase is an athlete monitoring system. It's made by a company called Fusion Sport. There's obviously several out there. It was very convenient timing, actually. I was going through kind of the vetting process of the various AMS companies while I was at Arizona all last fall, because you know, it really, for me, the AMS concept is a very tangible representation of what I kind of hold to be fundamentally true about sport, in terms of having a very, you know, centralizing hub and a level of synchronicity to ensure that all stakeholders are pushing athletes in the same direction, rather than pulling them because they want their, you know, bit from whatever their respective department is. So I've been vetting all these different AMS systems while I was at Arizona, under that, you know, sort of driver of let's improve the product that we're delivering to these athletes. Let's make sure that everybody's on the same page about what's going on with these athletes. And SmarterBase really kind of came through from, you know, from seeing demos of the software, from speaking to a couple different professionals in the industry who utilize SmarterBase and have utilized other platforms previously. It really struck a chord with me as the kind of the system that I wanted to be able to hang my hat on for being able to accomplish that goal within this program. And, you know, the things that really stuck out about it to me were everything that can be sort of built out within the system can be learned by me. And so before I was on this call with you guys, I was going through what they call their SmarterBase Academy, which is, you know, they require you as part of your contractual agreement to complete this course to learn how to work within SmarterBase, because they don't want it to be a, you know, they'll fish for you. They want it to be a teach you how to fish, and then with time you can continue to build out your system and be more and more, or less and less, reliant on their consultants to work with you. They still offer you somebody to work with you and help you through tasks, especially in the early stages of you know, getting onboarded with it. But they want you to be able to be independent and really kind of, you know, build and curate the system to what your organization needs. And so, you know, within that, the biggest learning curve has definitely been the system itself. Now that I have a very good grasp on it, it's really much more like user-friendly Excel, but it's just kind of learning how to navigate their platform, their vernacular, and where you have to kind of go to be able to elicit certain functions. But, you know, to me, it's better than Excel, because there are functions I wish were in Excel that this platform has. And the thing that, you know, I always look for within software systems in sports science is does the like functionality and the kind of the workflows to arrive at the emergent visualizations or dashboards, does it function intuitively, which to me conveys that it was designed by people that have worked in sport and understand what the needs are in terms of, you know, being able to deliver effective visualizations and dashboards to, again, convey a variety of information to sport coaches, medical staff, your performance staff, even to athletes. Because now our athletes, this spring I built out an athlete app, so they can.
So you had to build out the app, or it's just part of SmarterBase?
So it's part of SmarterBase.
And then the coaches, they all have their own separate login too?
Correct. So we're sort of like, as we need to bring people into SmarterBase, we're adding them in. So obviously the most need was bringing the sport coaches in, bringing our performance staff in, and then bringing our department heads in from sports med, nutrition, what have you. It's going to continually expand, but we wanted to make sure that it didn't get too big too quickly and we kind of lose control on who has access to what. So as we've built out more and more pieces, we've brought more and more people into SmarterBase. You know, my long-term vision is that everyone within the building has some level of access to SmarterBase, because at the end
they can access it, they just don't edit it, right? That's just you?
Correct. So there's different levels of permissions that I can adjust, and this is what SmarterBase does really, really well, and what you know, they've one of their big kind of bragging points or selling points is that their privacy and their permissions and roles setup is so airtight. They won some really, really high level award for how they structure that, and their platform is even utilized by the Department of Defense. So the way they've set everything up is very, very airtight. So I can give different levels of permissions to different people, and this is a very commonplace you know, structure for AMS systems to have, to where you can, you know, delineate roles very clearly and delineate access to certain platforms or dashboards by the role that that person is filling. So you know, we're not bringing everybody in and they get access to everything. So like right now, you know, our performance staff has access to almost everything. Our sport coaches right now, they just have access to our daily wellness data, and then we're rolling this out with them in the next 2 weeks. But they have access to it. Our kind of our accountability teams, which we call our SWAT teams, and then our player profiles, which are like the comprehensive rundown of a guy that they can go in and see, you know, demographic information, anthropometric data, performance data, that SWAT team accountability system data as well. And then there's a like positional profile, so they can see, you know, because the inevitable second question is, well, how does this guy stack up within his position group? So they have all that same data, but it's in a table that they can see their guys, filter each, you know, metric by, you know, ascending, descending, and see how their guys stack up relative to each other.
Z score within each position group and then against the whole team, or just in their position group?
We're doing both.
Gotcha.
But right now, you know, again, with levels of permissions, position coaches will only see their guys.
Yep.
Coordinators will see their side of the ball. Coach Kelly can obviously see everybody, along with the special teams personnel can see everybody as well.
For you, you know, hearing you talk about that, and like you said, you first of all, you were vetting this stuff at Arizona as a strength and conditioning coach. Then, like you said, you're not one of the full-time 5, because this is supposed to be your own full-time gig. It sounds like this would have been exhausting to try to do if you were at Arizona as a strength coach. Like, you need to be a guy that's only doing this. Like you said, imagine if you're having to, you know, be programming for another team while you're trying to go through their SmarterBase Academy. So that again, that just sounds like an undertaking for somebody to have only this, because it's almost like its own team within a team.
It really is, and it's definitely been a you know, again, I'm in all of our meetings. You know, I offer suggestions and ideas when we're talking through, you know, upcoming programming phases, what have you. But it is really, really nice to, you know, again, like you alluded to, thinking through that if I still had to have the team load that I had at Arizona, I was working with 4 teams at the end there, plus getting all of this operational for, you know, now I believe they have 24, 20, 21, 20, I'm somewhere like, it's either 21 or 24, I think, sports at Arizona, having to operationalize that across all of those different programs. And then you throw into the mix that each of those programs has their own sets of technologies, because that was the other piece that I was pushing for was, let's kind of stay in. If we agree that we want GPS, let's only get Catapult. But we had 2 or 3 GPS systems on campus at Arizona at the time. And so those become completely kind of separate build outs, and different levels of functionality in terms of being able to reproduce dashboards and pull in the data and deploy this AMS across the entire athletic department. So yeah, to be able to do it effectively, you absolutely need somebody that is in a sports science only position or a sports science concentrated position, because my free time is spent building. So, we sit down from a session, and of course my mind during the session is running about whatever, latest issue I've been trying to work through in terms of getting a visual to work in SmarterBase or whatever, sort of project I have to finish. I sit down and I start hammering away at those projects. And so, to be able to, again, have that clear role delineation and focus on building this out has been awesome for me, to just kind of have that it's not a one track mindset, but it's a very focused mindset towards let's make this as functional as possible. And again, it comes from the top that, even up to Coach Kelly, he's like, we're going to build this slow, we're going to build this right. He's not rushing me to have Rome built in a day, and neither is Jake. And so, I'll build something out, I'll share it with Jake, we'll kick back and forth on what he likes, what he thinks could change. Then we'll roll it out to the rest of the staff, see what they think, kick ideas back and forth. And then, we'll finally bring it to Coach Kelly. So like the most recent piece, and this is what, from talking to the people I work with at SmarterBase, they said has kind of been the most proprietary build that they've done, because everybody uses AMS systems to house performance data. But from what they've told me, nobody has used it to kind of run and systemize their accountability programs, if you will, because it's a very commonplace element to have in a football program. It is some sort of way of holding athletes accountable to discipline throughout all areas of their life. So are they showing up on time for tutors? Are they showing up to athletic training appointments? Are they keeping their locker clean? And so Coach Kelly's kind of brought this SWAT team system with him from Notre Dame, that it's just a point system. They're put within teams, and leaders are selected for each team. They drafted their teams at the end of spring, and they're held accountable to doing well in all aspects of their life. And we're getting academic reports. They're gaining and losing points based on what they're doing in the classroom, what they're doing in rehab, what they're doing in here from a training standpoint, what they're doing on the field from a movement standpoint. And all of that is we've now got it to where what used to be a 20, 30 something page report that gets sent out weekly, and obviously has a lot of manual creation to it and manual moving of different pieces to it, is an automated system, an automated 7 tab dashboard within SmarterBase. So as soon as we're done pushing the points into it from really quick upload process, the report's done. Everybody's where they need to be, where they would be in that PDF report, and the report's done on Friday, and everybody has access to it real time.
So you're uploading all of that data as well?
That is what I delegated to my intern.
Okay, but still, like I just said, in terms of not only are you running the SmarterBase just for the actual training facility, now you've got all those other pieces as well. So add that to 4 teams that you're programming for, in addition to being at Arizona or anybody else who might be having in a similar situation. Exactly.
And I think when I kind of think to the hypothetical of how that would have potentially gone down, were I still at Arizona, it would have been something to the extent of every team would have gotten a base level kind of minimum viable product to roll out, and it would be rooted in the stuff I presented on for Strength Coach Network, in terms of let's get some sort of measure of the dose response relationship. So dose in terms of SRP and from the training load, and then response in terms of a wellness survey. Roll that out with every team, because that could be that's 2 dashboard builds, and then it can be easily distributed across all the different teams with how you set the permissions and what have you. And then, if teams were going to want more like proprietary builds, that would lend itself to the case that my workload needs to be cut somewhere else. If I'm going to be spending more time building these things, tweaking them to what different stakeholders want, so that their, SmarterBase platform best services their teams. And so again, that's where it's been awesome being here, is that I have a sole focus on what we are doing within this football program. And I have a boss that he was the one doing all this previously, so he sat in my chair before he got here. So to have him helping me attune to what, the way they've done things, what Coach Kelly and his staff are used to seeing, and what have you, has made it really easy to not have to I build it out the way that I think would be best, and then I present it to Coach Kelly, and it's completely off from what he's used to. So having, Jake's tutelage to, what's been done previously, and has been really, really helpful in helping these things land very quickly and require minimal iteration from there.
How refreshing is that, to be with a coach that does that, but also to be just surrounded by, like you said, your performance team of like-minded individuals, the proximity of everybody in that same building, like just that organized, unified vision that you guys have, I'm sure is the same way across all the other, people within your performance team.
Yeah, it's been tremendous. I just, it's very, so I've had an experience like this before, that I've talked to a lot with my lacrosse team at William and Mary, to where everybody was rowing in the same direction. There was a very, very high level of synchronicity and just enjoyment of the work itself, because everything was so collaborative and open and objective and honest. And that permeated down to the athletes themselves and created this very unique situation where just everything went really, really right. And, wins went up, injuries went down, performance went up. Subjective appraisal of the year itself was through the roof. Everybody truly enjoyed what was happening, and it feels the same way here. It really does feel like everything is just aligning. Everybody's on the same page about what the mission is, and how we're going to go about it. We've had some awesome meetings with Coach Kelly where he's laid out what our mission is, how we're going to get there, and what's important to him in terms of how we do the job. And again, it's not you must run 300-yard shuttles. It's how we're going to interact with the athletes. He talks about being demanding, not demeaning. Like, we can absolutely hold the players to a high standard and expect a lot from them, but we won't do it by demeaning them. So again, he has very important pillars for how we go about the job, but he's not going to sit there and micromanage the X's and O's of how we do our day-to-day job.
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to it with what you've talked about, coming in and, not being micromanaged and not kind of having to do dogmatic things in the sport of football, but especially in what people would call the SEC, where they were even more rooted in dogmatic stuff. Talk about what it's like to work at a program where you're no longer worried about, the four fingers in the air, right? You guys are worried about just training and doing things the right way. It doesn't matter, what happens in the fourth quarter. It's the same as the first, second, or third.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's a breath of fresh air with the traditionalism that tends to plague college football. It's nice that, it's looked at very, pragmatically, of like, look, if you put 30 on them in the first quarter, holding the fours up doesn't matter at the end. And I remember you taking a picture of it when you were here, but Coach Kelly looks at kind of our kind of the four coactive model from Fergus Connolly, where he talks about the physical, the technical, the tactical, and the mental. And the really, really cool part of that we're actually going through right now with the team is the mental performance training. And he's brought in a sports psychologist specialist that she is diving into the weeds with our players of how to optimize their mental game, and giving them very simplistic exercises and tools in the toolbox for putting themselves in the best position. Like the fundamental mission that she talks about is the whole goal of mental performance training is how can I perform my very best consistently and when it matters most. And so she's like, we laid that out as the goal of mental performance training, and then she's diving into, how to go about that and how to ensure that the players can do that with as minimal of a decrement as possible from their absolute best. And so, like, one of the most recent lessons that she talked about was arousal state, and it was awesome to hear. We're talking through, like, just because you need bump and rap music to get ready for the game does not mean that the guy next to you needs that. The guy next to you might need instrumental music and more quiet time. And so she talked about, if you had to appraise your subjective, like 1 to 10, where you play your best at, write that number down. And then she's like, okay, so now what do you do if you're above or below that number? And she talked about solutions for if you need to turn up more or if you need to turn down more. And she's giving them very simple tools for them to, like, put themselves in that that flow state, so that they truly can perform their best. And again, I think it's been talked about a lot around the Strength Coach Network, platform. But truly, when you look at, like, elite level athletes and the NFL Combine in particular, the guys that get there are the cream of the crop. They've produced their physical specimens, but then you always end up with the draft busts every year. So it's clearly not physical, technical, tactical limitations. It's something in their mental game. And so to see the premium being placed on, not doing the kind of feelsy, like, empty, like, mental performance stuff, but actual, like, this is the science of it. Here are some actual solutions that have been, demonstrated to be effective in research and in, practice. Here are some ways to go about this, and for you guys to be able to truly perform your best when it matters most, and to do it that way every time. It's very cool to see the premium being placed on that, because, again, as has been talked about a lot, like, the physical piece is really, really easy. There's enough information out there and enough, practice-based evidence, if you will, of how to make guys faster, how to make them more powerful, how to make them stronger, how to make them fitter. With all the sport coaching as well, that they're going to improve their technique, they're going to improve their tactical understanding of the game. That mental piece is kind of, to me, the next frontier of sport, and of getting away from it being like a really, really soft science that is just kind of plagued by empty platitudes, to, okay, let's figure out ways that are much more backed and rooted in the science to unlock an athlete's potential at the mental level.
How receptive have the guys been to that?
What's honestly been really cool is when we've gone to these, because we're having about 2 or 3 sessions a week right now. We're kind of doing a month.
Big group or smaller?
So we did a team meeting at first. We've had a couple of offense-defense meetings, and then they'll break out into position groups at some point, I believe, from what I've been told. We still got another 2 weeks of going through it. But so typically I sat a row behind all the athletes, and it's awesome stuff. So I'm taking notes too, but then just kind of watching the guy's body language to what she's talking about. And again, it's one of those things that guys you don't necessarily think are paying attention. You're watching and they're writing notes intently, or you're seeing, like, little snippets of what they've written, and they're taking it to heart. So I think the receptivity to it is very, very strong. Just because I think they realize it's a piece of their game that they've never really given thought to.
Yeah, and like you said, when it starts at the top, when the head coach puts it on the wall, like, that's going to be placed at a premium, right?
I think with, like, the new generations and all the tools available, there's a great window of opportunity to do something really good. But there's that kind of, like, double-edged sword in which there's a lot of fluff and a lot of stuff that, tends to aim to being, pitchy and for sales and stuff. So there's a lot going on. But if you sort of get a good professional and the right amount, it's untapped territory, isn't it? Because people think that, the concept of mental toughness and mental preparedness has evolved from, like, we all do the same to individual. I think that's just how the world is working, isn't it? Like, in general, with information, and you know, I'm part of a team, but you know, as long as we all get to the same place, we're all gonna use different roads. So that balance between the synergy and the individualism, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's what she said that day one. She's like, "This is not going to be a fluff piece series of presentations. This is like this is what she got her doctorate in. This is what she wrote a book on. This is what she is contracted by a lot of different highly successful programs to teach about. And then you hear the things she speaks to, and you know, again, within our profession, I feel like we tap into a lot of different domains and kind of get like, in a lot of different domains, kind of a surface level knowledge of, what's being utilized as best practice within that space. You hear her talking about things and then, tying it back to, be it neuroscience, be it physiology, be it skill acquisition or motor learning. And it's like, yeah, this isn't just fluff. This is stuff that works, stuff that makes sense, and stuff that is rooted in what science says right now to be best practice. And so it's awesome. And she's again, she tremendous professional. She's bringing it to a level that is digestible for our players. But then when we've had, because she's been around the program for the last couple of weeks, so there's been good opportunities to speak with her, and to speak more at the level of two professionals that have very overlapping spaces that they work within. So to hear the way she's going about speaking to the players has been a master class in coaching, and coaching in a different space than necessarily I spend my time coaching. So that's just it's been really cool to see. And to me, this is, I think, what ultimately helps unlock our potential, which, coming from the sports science guy, probably, sounds a bit interesting to hear. But yeah, again, I truly believe that from my experiences, the most successful programs have been the ones that the mental composition of the program and kind of the organizational health of it, if you will. And I think a lot of that organizational health stems from the psychology of the athletes, psychology of the coaches, and how those components are interacting with each other. I really do think that a strong mental coactive within all stakeholders of the program can make up for any deficiencies that may occur within the physical, technical, or tactical realms. And that to me, this is what's exciting me the most about having an impact on our team and enabling us to achieve maybe a higher level of success than what people might think for a program in year one under a new head coach might do.
Now, speaking of what really makes you excited, and speaking of things that are new, Fritter Friday got brought to LSU football, right? And like that had to be one of the coolest things, right? Like that had to be a pinch me moment, right? Like, come on.
Yes, that was so again, there's a ton of people around the building, and like you realize there are like positions that like you didn't even think were positions. But so the guy that runs the LSU football account and assists in running Coach Kelly's social media accounts, he got moved over here. Just recently got a promotion. He's moved into the building, so he's been around a lot more. And of course, you start meeting people and talking with them, and then they kind of like see the things that you're posting about too, and jokes start going back and forth. And I made a crack at one point in the spring semester where I was like, yeah, Friday or Friday, wherever like tweeted about or something, I would just drop the mic right off into the sunset and be done because my work's complete.
Like George Constanza, you make a good joke and be like, I'm out of here. I'm out of here.
And sure enough, again, it happened first freaking semester. And it was really funny because, coming into Jake was, completely like we had conversations, but and I knew he knew here, but like he was the one who brought up Fritter Friday the first weeks we were there, and was the one who brought in Fritters the first few weeks. So like it came from him, and a few other my colleagues like had followed Kier as well and knew that like that was kind of our shtick, and it just kind of it built momentum. And then
there's that word again, momentum.
Yes.
That's
In a completely
leadership.
different application.
That's leadership, you know. That's all screaming, bringing fritters for everyone. That's leadership right there.
Yeah, and so then when it took off a little bit more because one of our analysts, his sister was a dietitian I worked with at Tulsa, and so she would give me hell whenever I posted about fritters. But then like she had side conversations with her brother about it as well, and her brother's a former head coach at several Division I universities, and he came in one morning and he had a dozen fritters with him, and he's like, I was just used to like whenever I was the head coach, I always brought in donuts on Friday mornings, and he's like, this is a pretty easy platform to just say, yeah, I'm going to bring in fritters. Started bringing them in every week, so we ended up with most weeks we have about 24 to 30 fritters available. Start like we can't eat all those, so I would just start going around the building with fritters, and I'd give them to athletic trainers, give them to equipment, give them to coaches upstairs. And so it caught a lot of momentum in the building. And, you know, everybody, like, whenever I see people now, they're, you know, always asking about fritters and whatnot. And then it built into being a social media post.
No, I mean, that's unbelievable.
So my work here is done.
Yeah. I think your work at LSU is done. Your work here on this podcast is done. I don't think there's a better place to wrap up.
I just gotta hope there's a fritter pension that they can pay me out for the rest.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. You know, if anybody is new and they don't know where to follow you on your fritter journey, or, you know, all other endeavors, strength and conditioning related, where can they follow you?
So my Twitter and Instagram handles are the same. Scott Kuehn 88. Kuehn is Kuehn, and then 88 like the number. And I think that's all my social media.
And of course, for all the members, there's 2 webinars featuring yourself. 3 webinars actually, isn't it? Because you got the
Trifecta.
big man.
Right.
And Justin wants to bring you on for a 4th, but I'm like, it's gonna be like Scott Kuehn Coach
Scott
Network.
Kuehn Network.
Like, yeah, we're gonna have to change the name and bring you in. But you know, that's in the book. So for people that have not checked your stuff yet, there's 3 webinars at the community. So go check that one out. And thank you very much. It's been great.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it a lot.
We celebrate by watching more videos just like it. You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.